In the 1970s, the Cold War was heating up, but one place more than any other would decide who dominates the world: space. And the reason? This man. He's considered the father of modern rocketry, and what he achieved could have changed everything. After studying engineering in Moscow, he joined the Soviet space program at the peak of the Cold War. But instead of designing rockets, his talents were used for something else entirely: infiltrate NASA. The plan: get close to the Americans and bring them down from within. But how do you send an undercover spy to the United States undetected? Easy. Create a false identity. Using a fake name, forged documents, and photographs, he walked right into Langley Research Center in Virginia, the beating heart of America's space program. It was here that he discovered what it truly meant to be an outsider. Inside this top-secret facility, he saw blueprints, specifications, and every last rocket secret that made Apollo fly. For 3 years, he memorized everything. Then it was time to return home. Back in the USSR, Vladimir showed the world how much he'd learned. Working with the Soviet rocket designer, he bridged the gap between theory and reality, bringing them just months behind NASA. Suddenly, the Soviets had the technology needed to beat the Americans to the moon. But now came a new set of orders from the KGB. First, destroy NASA's launch pad and then delay the moon landings for years. So he did what any good spy would do and made some friends in high places. His first target was the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. He befriended a U.S. Air Force officer called Major Harold Herring, the man responsible for protecting Apollo. But he also had a weakness: gambling. Vladimir exploited this and blackmailed him into getting access to the launch pad. With the help of a few accomplices, they prepared their explosives, but before they could plant them, Herring got cold feet. The next day, he confessed everything to the FBI, calling Vladimir the most dangerous spy in America. That was the end of the Cape mission. But Vladimir had a lot of nerve. He just had to get closer to NASA. After a year in hiding, he surfaced again, this time infiltrating the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston. Here, he met a man who would change his life forever: astronaut Rusty Schweighardt. Rusty was a test pilot who flew on Apollo 9, but there was a problem. He suffered from claustrophobia. So while training for the mission, Vladimir offered his help, and slowly they formed a genuine friendship. One day, Rusty noticed some strange behavior. Why was Vladimir taking pictures of the command module? What was he doing with those Polaroids? At first, Vladimir lied and said he was an aerospace engineer. But then he revealed the truth. As soon as Rusty heard that Vladimir was a Soviet spy, he wanted to call the cops. But then he stopped. He knew exactly what it was like to face danger beyond the stars. So instead of turning him in, he decided to help. With his guidance, Vladimir stole hundreds of pages of secret data. Together, they smuggled the photos and information to waiting Soviet agents. In return, Vladimir gave Rusty intelligence about the future of the space program, even warning him about the dangers of Skylab, the next project after Apollo. It was supposed to be a state-of-the-art space station, but it ended up being a death trap. Rusty survived, but 3 of his crewmates didn't. Vladimir felt terrible about what happened. He was supposed to be working for the greater good of the Soviet Union, but instead, he was helping the Americans win the space race. Torn between loyalty and the truth, he became a double agent. He leaked sensitive information to the CIA and helped them track down Soviet spies living in America. But not everyone was happy about this arrangement. After learning about his past, one man wanted revenge. His name was Anatoly. He was also a Soviet spy, but unlike Vladimir, he had no intention of changing sides. He believed that communism was the future of humanity, and anyone who disagreed with him was a traitor. The 2 men had been working together for years, but now their relationship had become very strained. And one night, they finally got into a massive fight. Anatoly called Vladimir a capitalist lackey, but he wasn't expecting his friend to snap. He threw him against the wall and reached for his gun. He pulled the trigger, but luckily the gun was empty. Now Vladimir had a choice to make. Either kill Anatoly or risk exposure. He chose the latter. He told the CIA everything about Anatoly, and when the FBI searched his house, they found $350,000 worth of stolen property. Game over. He was arrested and sent back to the USSR, where he expected the worst. But he never imagined the KGB would treat him this way. They paraded him around the country, humiliating him in front of his family and friends. All of that just so he could tell them how great the CIA is. Then he was thrown into prison, where he spent the next 15 years trying to survive. Eventually, he was released and given a noble title, Hero of the Soviet Union. But now the KGB was making sure he lived the rest of his life in obscurity. He was forced to sign papers renouncing his American citizenship, giving up all rights to see his wife and kids. And if that wasn't bad enough, he had to watch as the Soviet Union fell apart. All of the sacrifices he made during the Cold War meant nothing. Looking back, he realized that his legacy would always be tainted. He was a hero who became a traitor. But what if the story ended differently? Let's imagine with me that Vladimir never defected to the Americans. Instead, he returned to the USSR with all the knowledge he gained in NASA. It was the perfect opportunity to put the Soviet Union ahead in the space race. But unfortunately, it never happened because of one man, Yuri Gagarin. He was the director of the Soviet space program, but he cared more about power than progress. Despite all of Vladimir's efforts, Yuri refused to listen. He thought that his own ideas were better. And in the end, he might have been right. After hitting a string of failures, the Soviet space program was on the verge of collapse. So Yuri took drastic measures and fired everyone involved in rocket design. Now he was left with no engineers and no way to compete with the Americans. The next time we hear from him, he's under arrest. His entire career, he chased power and prestige, but all he ended up with was a prison cell. And to think he could have been a hero. And now it's time for you to become a hero. Click to subscribe and you won't miss a single episode.